This is Just a Few Questions. Just a Few Questions. I'm your host, Marc Sims from Chicago. And I have Laurie Glenn on the line. And Laurie Glenn is the president and CEO of Think Inc. Now, Think Inc. is a Chicago-based international strategic public affairs and political consulting firm. Did I get that right, Laurie?
Yes, you did, Mark. Thank you.
Now, when you're not doing political consulting, what is that other stuff? Public affairs. What does that mean? I know what it means, but what do you do?
Well, actually, yeah. So Think Inc. Works in social justice issues, basically, and primarily with communities of color. And we have done a lot of work over many, many years with the African American, Latino, and Muslim communities. One of the reasons I especially think it's important as a Jewish woman, agnostic Jew, but Jewish nonetheless, I think the Jewish people and Muslim people must come together and work together so we don't blow ourselves up. I think that's pretty critical. And we tend to work in communities who have been challenged financially. So we've done that with communities from Oakland to Chicago and across the country. And I've done international consulting with the German Marshall Fund. We've taught at the Sorbonne, and it's like the Queen's we. I didn't mean it like that. I'm talking about my company, but I've taught at the Sorbonne how to use research strategically to frame and public debate on policy issues. And I've just been really lucky that I get to do what I believe in and what I love for a living professionally. It's been really a gift.
Laurie Glenn, in this time of the coronavirus, the COVID-19 crisis, are people that you work with, and just people in general you come across, are they rethinking things? Are they going to change a little bit? Or because in a crisis is always a great time to change things. Are people going to try to change what they do or have been doing in this time of crisis?
Well, I think they say necessity is the mother of invention. So I assume that many things will change and evolve through this crisis. And while we know the devastation that's going on in individual families, personally, in our communities, and obviously watching this national divide that we see. But at the same time, we know that new ideas will emerge and evolve. I'm working on creating this thing we call Peace Chicago 2020 that we hope will happen annually. And I'm looking at this happening in September, but I am also looking at how can I make programs, events, and experiences happen virtually for people, because we may have a virtual world for a while. Now, it's not really how I want to live my life. I like the human touch. I like being in the rooms with people. I believe in pheromones. I like to read body language, but I can't do that right now. So I could bemoan my fate, or I can transform and go, all right, I'm on a town hall meeting right now with young people who are addressing how COVID is affecting their mental health, and how can I help my client convey that message and communicate that through the media so that people can start hearing the impact of COVID on young people of color who are in challenged communities financially. So I think that this is a time as well. You know, the Chinese have this symbol for crisis and opportunity, and it's the same symbol. And I've been working with that symbol since I was 21 years old, and Ronald Reagan was elected president. And we were in California, and I worked with these political leaders to create this thing called the California Project, because the left didn't realize it was a walking zombie at that point when Reagan was elected. And little did we know that Reagan was nothing next to what we have in the White House today.
Now, you're telling your age by saying you remember Ronald Reagan, so we know how old you are. That means you've been around, you've seen a few things, but a lot of us have never seen in our lifetime nothing like this, a reality star president in a worldwide pandemic and an economic collapse that could go into a depression. We're going to have a few fun years here. About a year and a half is going to be a lot of fun, isn't it, Laurie?
Well, I have to say that it is now up to the Democratic Party to unify its message and for us to build a ground game, because I think taking back the White House is the most important thing we can do, because we need leadership at the top who will unify our country together. Just as Jack Kennedy said years ago, do not ask what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. We must focus on creating the we and not the me, and not focus on our divisions. I spent all my life, frankly, as a white woman, a white Jewish woman, working in communities of color. And, I'd walk into a room and everyone would have lots of ideas about who I was. And I might have ideas about who other people were who were different from me. But my job in every room I've ever been in has been to identify what I had in common with another person. How could I connect with them on some level? And that is what we need to begin to build again, is this spirit in the United States that we are the United States, not the divided states, and that we need to have voices that demonstrate that we all care about our families. We all care about our safety. We all care about our economic vitality. We all care about having a good life, a solid life, a safe life, and one that we can fulfill our own hopes and dreams. So we have that in common. That is a group we think, and that is what I do in my own work and on an everyday basis in my own life. And right now, I think as a nation, we need leaders who are going to be talking about the we.
I want to go back to Ronald Reagan and Jack Kennedy, because this country ain't the same place it was when Jack Kennedy's president, and Ronald Reagan is a much different place. That's another conversation I would love to have with you. Let's end this podcast by asking something. Because I live here on the far south side. In Chicago, in places like Chicago, urban and suburban, do you ever think, I'm being utopian when I say these things, that we could stop this crime in Chicago when Chicago's not known for crime and murder? You ever think we're going to get there in the next 10, 20 years? 5 years?
Well, Mark, that's a really big question. And I'm going to say very hopefully yes. But I believe that is something that, again, will require a greater we. I've always believed that on the south and west side of Chicago, we needed something that was a more comprehensive approach to addressing the disinvestment, the racism, and the poverty that we created as a society for the people who are living in those communities. And I believe that if there is the political will, now I tend to believe that the current mayor is a very different mayor than our previous mayors, and I've lived under several of them now, but especially the last mayor who was so divisive. And while we have Democratic socialists who aren't as happy with Laurie as they might like to be, I believe that Laurie Lightfoot, who is a Black woman, who also is lesbian, who is minority herself on so many levels. I always like to tease, and she's short on top of it. So she represents a lot of minority populations. And I want to say that I believe that with a leader like Laurie, if we are able to galvanize the business community in a much broader way and bring them to the table where it's not just individual people like, I admire David Doig for the work CNI does, and you've got a little, Whole Foods here or a Starbucks there, and yes, things start small and they can be incremental, but I believe that as a city, we have to decide that, again, the we versus the me, and that we are going to stop the inherent racism that has just never been dealt with, and it hasn't been dealt with since the beginning of our Constitution, where a deal was cut with the South that would allow slavery in our country. And then we had to deal with it again in a civil war. And that is what we're dealing with again right now nationally with these divisions, where what's really going on is in many ways a backlash that we would allow a Black man to be president of the United States. And it's the last gasp of white America. And let's say white America is on its last legs, because within just several years, the majority of Americans will be people of what we call people of color and not what we call people who are white. So going back to your question, do I think that things can change? Well, I wouldn't be doing the work I do all my life if I didn't. And I've watched change, and most change does have to be incremental, but I believe that there are many people in the communities, and I work with these groups, Communities Partnering for Peace, neighborhood groups, EMON, SWAP, INVC, Target Area Development Corporation, also One North Side, Breakthrough, Enlace, on, in all these neighborhoods. And these groups, I am very proud of the work of the groups that I work with, and these are people who are committed to their neighborhoods. They believe in the power of their neighborhoods, and I believe that these groups are part of a solution that I think we can lead towards a safer community. Now, do I think it's going to happen tomorrow? No. Do I think it's going to happen even in the next 2 to 3 years? No, I think it's going to be a much longer road than that. But I do believe that we can have a safer Chicago, because that's one of the things I'm working for, is to say I don't want to go somewhere around the world and have someone say, "Oh, Laurie, are you safe?" I'm like, I hate their guts. I'm like, seriously? Really? Chicago is an incredibly vibrant city with incredibly, diverse, interesting, communities of people who really, I love Chicago. I love the people in Chicago because we're not pretentious like the coast. We're in the middle. We're the heartland. And I think we have a lot of heart, is what I want to say.
Well, with Laurie Lightfoot, I had a chance to meet her once. Very, very wonderful person. I met you once. You're another wonderful person. And people like yourself give me hope. I give up hope, then I meet a Laurie Glenn, and I say, wow, maybe we will do this. I'm hopeful. So thanks for being on the show. I cannot thank you enough. Your information on the bottom of this video. And you're going to come back and talk to us again, or talk to me again?
Oh, I'd love to, Mark. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate what you're doing. You have a really interesting perspective on the world, and I appreciate that. Thank you.